Okay, so I thought I would go over the idea behind this setup today, doing this particular study. So, in a sense, it's based on this instrument I've been working on for some time, which is, I guess you would call hybrid musical instrument that combines some percussive elements, some string elements, and a few others, I guess, that are hard to describe. So down here you have a terminal device for electrical purposes, and I reuse that as a kalimba. So you have a variety of metal objects in here, hairpins, large table saw blade. You've got large paper clips, binder clips, even a kalimba blade in here. You have a snare device that typically gets used in a snare drum. You've also got some springs here, these large door springs, a repurposed handle from, or not the handle, it's actually the flipper part from a kitchen instrument. There's actually, I have some interrupt switches. I put two of those in here, which would allow you to give a, I guess you could say a phasing effect. So if you're playing the spring and you press this, you're just doing a simple on and off of the circuit there, giving you that effect, which sometimes one thing to think about, because I have in here wired piezo mics under here. And I can show you maybe I'll show you the inside of that here in a second. But one thing to think about is, anything you're doing on a box like this, because you're picking up your playing, you might also be picking up some of these sounds. So it's something to think about. I also put in a three-way switch so I could change essentially the timbre, the sound of the piezos in there, and I can also dial them in terms of the levels here. So put in two potentiometers. And by the way, these are pretty easy. If you're halfway decent at soldering, they're pretty easy to look up. A lot of the cigar box guitar websites that you can find out there have very good schematics that show you how to wire just about everything. The easiest thing to do is take your quarter-inch output jack and wire that to a piezo. So you don't have to put in these elements if you don't want to. I mean, they just sort of refine what you can do, but I wouldn't say it takes it to a level that is going to be spectacular or amazing beyond maybe what you could just do wiring one of these guys to one or two piezos, either in a serial or in parallel, up to you. Like I said, the door stopper there gives a nice spring effect. And then I got this idea from the Mark Corvin's instrument online that he uses for horror movies. And the original idea was I was on the end of these going to put heavy weights, and I'll still probably do that. And the idea is that you would get a little bit of sort of a reverberation like that. They also kind of work as percussion instruments, so if you play these, they work pretty well. So what I did was I took a couple screws here and took two dulcimer wires, dulcimer strings, and actually I think these are zither strings. And these are hammer dulcimer pins. These are actually really handy. I got a set of like 25 of these, and they're pretty easy to use because obviously you can't really work with, if you get the loop end of any kind of string, you can use a really simple setup like I did, which allows you to take a couple screws and attach the wires on the loop end. The problem you get into is this end, right? Because you need tension. Well, two things you need. One is you need to be able to put the end of the string, because there isn't a loop on this end, into something, and then you need tension. You need to be able to move it clockwise, right, to tune it higher in pitch, counterclockwise lower in pitch, make it sharper or flatter depending on what you want to do with your sound. So you need something like this, and these are really handy. You can get, they're not super cheap, but they're well made. If you look at some of the cigar guitar box websites or go on Amazon or eBay, they're usually redundantly listed by the same company on one of those sites. So basically you drill a hole and you pound it in with a hammer, and then once it's in there tight enough, it's really tight, you just take a wrench and you tighten it or loosen it, again clockwise, counterclockwise, depending on what you want to do. You can buy actually a dulcimer key. They're not that cheap, they're like 10 or 15 bucks. So for me, I take a pair of pliers and I do that. it works pretty well. So I've got different strings on here, a higher string, a lower one, and this was kind of an accident. So if you listen to it, you get a pretty good, I think this is blocking it, hold on. I don't know if you're picking that up, but it has this really cool sound to it because it's not fully tight in here. It came loose a little bit, so I left that. And then what I'm doing is I've hooked up the solenoid for the field kit to give me that effect of hitting the string. And I noticed online someone commented on, I think it was on my YouTube, something about how I was using the solenoid in the strings, and they were sort of implying that it was an incorrect usage and so forth. And my reply was, you know, the whole point, I think, of the field kit is you make it your own. If you go back to my video on the Bricolage Garage, it was talking about how you really are inspired by what Coma Electronic has done here to do things in new ways. And I think, you know, the fact that they have that 50 ways to use manual, hopefully over time, people come up with 100 different ways to use it. So one of my favorites is actually taking the solenoid and in some cases really cranking it up super high on the DC driver and getting these cool effects. So this is going to be a big part of, I think, what you're going to be hearing today when I do this. And I actually routed it through my looper just for the sake of saving some mixer channels, and I'll probably throw an octave effect on there because my looper has a lot of cool effects. And speaking of that, then what'll happen is the other channel of the looper, I have my Schoenhut toy piano, and what I've done here is a very simple mod. I've simply added a piezo inside here. If you look at Simone the Magpie, his site, he does a ton of this. You know, there's a lot of great stuff on YouTube and social media for you to check out. Basically, I'm going to use this, and that's going to be running through a pretty big verb, the E-dome on the Ventris dual reverb, which I just got recently and is like super amazing. It's just absolutely a amazing reverb, and it's one of those effects pedals. We're seeing a lot of these now that I haven't fully explored all the possibilities, and there's a lot to it. There's even an app that allows you to dial in new reverbs and download those that have been created by users out there, which is, I think, a movement we're seeing now in music, is that more and more people are experimenting with stuff online, expressing that online, and sharing their ideas and their patches and so forth. So that's kind of what's happening sonically, I think, from the acoustic sources, a couple others to speak of. So I am using the field kit. Essentially, I'm just, today, I think I have the LFO hooked up into the CV trigger to run the DC driver. Again, the solenoid is going to be banging, and we'll hear that. At some point, you're going to hear it maybe even popping under the string, and it gives a really cool effect kind of when it gets out of control. So the other thing that's going to happen, I have the PO33 Pocket Operator, which is their new sampler by Teenage Engineering, and this I found to be pretty remarkable. It's one of these things. I recently had a Roland drum machine that I sold on eBay, and I thought, at some point down in the future, I want to do my drums via a modular format. So I thought, for now, what can I use for drums? And this has proved to be just spectacular. I mean, it's the simplicity. The price, of course, is amazingly cheap. So what we're going to do is we're going to take just the output from the instrument I've created, and I'm just going to bang on it. What's cool is when you do a recording on the Pocket Operator, it essentially will put your samples. It looks at the transients, so if sort of when it hears the end of a sound, it will jump to the next slot. So what will happen is we'll sample just banging on this instrument at the various ends, where you're going to get some metallic sounds, some springy sounds, some wooden sounds, and then that's going to run into here, and those will become my drum sounds. And what I'm going to do then is have this as the drum loop. Now, this is not necessarily going to be synced up with the rest of my equipment. I was just thinking about that as far as if I want to try to sync it, but maybe more on that later. But in any case, this will be the drums, and this will be essentially, yeah, it's just the drum track on the song. So I also have this hand drum here set up, and I'm not really using it for percussion. So what I have on the bottom is one of our piezos that shipped with the expansion kit with the field kit. And by the way, getting excited there, or getting really close. I've been watching their Kickstarter. videos are getting really close to release the new field effects unit, and I think that's going to be just another game changer like this one was. I think in some ways it's even going to be better and more creativity that's going to allow you to explore sonic possibilities. And for those folks out there that do small setups and do gigs, you could take, you know, a pocket operator to the field kit, the new field kit effects unit, a synth of some sort, maybe some small synths, and you could really do some amazing sets in, you know, the space of just a small desktop. And I think that's getting pretty amazing with the form factor. In any case, back to this. So the Remo drum then has the contact mic going into channel 1, and this is the basic setup to do the envelope follower. So just keep in mind, you take your sound signal going in and then engage your auxiliary channel on whatever channel you want, and then you take your auxiliary out, and again, you may have to adjust your auxiliary volume if you're not getting enough sensitivity. Mine's maybe cranked a little too high, but it's fine, right? It's just basically triggering my envelope follower. So what happens is that goes into the signal in on the envelope follower, and then I'm taking, I actually have, I guess, the gate out. I don't think I'm using the CV radio today. I don't really need this setup. So what I'm mainly doing is taking the envelope out. From the envelope follower, I've got a couple of these hubs, which I love, and these are amazing. So it takes a signal and then splits it into 5 out. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this signal. So I'm going to basically hit the drum, whatever you want to use to hit it, and you'll notice this in the song, and then that is going to send that signal, I'm getting caught on my chords here, to the splitter. The splitter then goes to a few different places. So one, it's going to go to this output, which is a second hub. We'll get to that in a second. It's going to go into the ring in on the System 1M. And I've been using this lately. It was one of these where, with some of the new gear I have, it's maybe a little less exciting, but I just, the sound of it, it has a very FM-y, artificial type sound that doesn't sound anything like the O-Coast or the No-Coast or the Model D, the Behringer, or some of the other synths. So I actually find that contrast to be pretty cool, and I've been using it recently for percussive effects, and I do a little bit in post-production in Logic as well. So when you hear this track in post, I'll probably throw on one of those Space Designer reverbs that add a little rhythmic component. So I can start with a patch here that has a rhythmic sound to it, and I can add even a little more rhythm to it to essentially use this as a quasi drum that's going to go along with the pocket operator. So yeah, in any case, we've got one mod coming in here, and I was thinking of doing another one here, maybe from the Phenovolt. We'll see how that goes. So, but going back to this hub, I've also got another, again, this is the drum envelope follower going into the hub. We've got another one coming out here that's going into the stereo field landscape, which is a new synth that is, I think, pretty cool. A lot of people online, there's mixed reviews of this because I think some people don't like how experimental it is. It's based on contact. You have really cool CV routing possibilities. You have 2 ins, 2 outs, just a ton of things you could do with both audio and CV. And so that's essentially what I'm using this for. Again, you're going to hear a percussive effect in the track because of this, because of how I'm routing it. Also, I have going into this through the input. I have this homemade device here, and this is essentially a guitar box that I painted. I've thrown in a potentiometer in the back to adjust the sensitivity. There's one piezo in there and an output. And so what I've done is I've used this in the past with the envelope follower on the field kit. I can also, of course, take the output, throw that into an effects box or throw it into here, whatever, the Behringer Model D, and use this, these metallic rods, essentially, that also have the terminal box connectors I'd use on the other kalimba, and I can use those in an audio sense, or as I said, I can run these into the envelope follower and use that to affect some of the CV gear on the synthesizers. Now this guy here is one of these ohm synths that you may have seen, and the funny thing is online, some folks who reviewed the landscape were saying don't buy this. You can buy an ohm synth on Amazon for like 17 bucks. And indeed, you can buy this for 17 bucks, but and it essentially has the same principle of this connective, you know, sensitivity to your skin and using that to control your sound. But this is nothing like this. So the folks saying that online are, I don't think have really played with the landscape, because it's a high level synthesizer and one of the most unique ones out there. But in any case, so what I've done here is attach this to the top of the box with some Velcro. I had to actually jerry rig or change the battery component. It's not the best made device, but it's pretty cool for what it does. So we'll use this in conjunction with this to give some sonic difference. And you know, if I want to actually, I can actually, with the metal here, conduct, when I do something like this and touch these poles, it actually has an effect. You're maybe hearing a little bit of that. There's a really bad external speaker on this thing. I'm using the output, which is not as noisy as you might think. But in any case, I can experiment with that. I can also use one of these metallic scrubbers, and I can create some interesting experiments as well, touching the various metal parts. And there was kind of a mistake. I didn't intend on this metal to act in a like this conductive sense, but it's worked pretty cool actually. So that's what's going on that side. And again, that's kind of one of the outputs from the splitter. The other one, as I said, is going into our next splitter, and this gets pretty convoluted. I think what I'm going to try to do is I'll put up a patch for the Model D, what I have going on, and I'm going to put up a patch for the phenol. This one I've been developing over some time, and it's a spaghetti bowl of mess, as you can see. So I'm going to have to, when I'm tearing down, really sit down and try to figure this out. I won't try to explain that patch right now. It's pretty complicated, but it's got some really cool routing going on, and the modulation sources are happening not just internal here, but external. So again, if you see my other videos with the phenol, because of the banana cables, you have to ground it at the back of the unit. Once you do that, you have the splitter, and then the splitter, I've tried to like color coordinate this, but it gets really complicated. I don't have any gray cables, but I try to keep green, yellow, blue together, although you can see down here I've already messed that up, because then my typical 1/8 inch cables coming out, I don't always have the same color. So color coding, I'm always thinking, is like one of those things that probably some really good modular people out there have figured out and use it to full potential, because at any point, you know, you start to forget what is going where. You can sometimes visually see things like this. This is pretty clear what's happening, but when you get into the spaghetti bowl of this, the sort of forest of cables, it almost becomes impossible to see what's happening. But so I'll try to explain it. So basically, I've got a couple of sources here. So I've got the phenol random out is coming out here, and then it's going into this junction. That junction is going back down this way to the Soma Lyra, which I recently just got, and is like, oh, I can't say enough about this synthesizer. It is like such, I mean, the build quality is absolutely amazing. But what this thing does sonically, if you're into experimental music, if you're into sonic exploration, this is like, you know, this is the greatest. It's just absolutely sonically so interesting, never boring. The level of control, what you can dial in here, is absolutely amazing. But in any case, what's happening is we're getting the random out that's coming in the CV voice input. This has a slew of inputs: CV delay, CV voices, and sorry, one other I'm forgetting right now, the hold. And so this is going in the CV voices. So the phenol random out is coming into here. It's creating, I think, a really cool sonic landscape. And then what I'm going to be doing is experimenting with you. I'm going to dial in the delay. The drive will probably be cranked up a little bit. And then I will really experiment with just some of the just the patching on here and the sonic possibilities. So again, that is coming out of the phenol through the hub. Let's see, this guy is unused, and I didn't want to do this, and now I'm realizing that I'm forgetting. This is kind of the fun of modular or semi-modular, is that you start to forget exactly what is happening. You know what I'm going to discover here, I bet? Yep, sure enough. So we've got actually, this is coming out of the phenol, I've got an open cable to work with. So this is maybe a tip of sorts. I bought another type of banana cable. These are the stock ones that ship with the phenol, and I bought a second set. I found on Amazon these like scientific cables that look different. So what's cool is I can use this to quickly identify, because I only have one patched up, where it's going. So basically this is going into oscillator 1, the FM in, right? So that's an input. So what I could do is take this, and we could essentially, like, let's take the LFO out on the Model D, and that'll create something interesting. Now again, when I'm playing, I have to remember with my patch that that essentially is getting one source of modulation or information coming from the Model D. And that's one of the challenges, I think, with doing this, is trying to remember. When you see like Colin Benders or someone like that doing this, it's pretty amazing, right? What they can do in terms of remembering things and thinking about what's affecting what's modulating what. So essentially that is that patch, and then we have one here. This basically, so this hub is going into this hub, which is primarily the Model D hub, and then I also have a second one going into this phenol patch point. And again, judging from my cable, that is going into oscillator 2. So you can kind of see that with these 6-point hubs, you can really expand what's going on in terms of your CV modular, semi-modular setup. And then this guy, I just started experimenting with some of the internal patching on the Model D. And so essentially this is just doing a few things here. And I think what I'll do is I'll just give you the whole patch that includes this particular patch setup here, and then also the oscillators and what's going on here. I also will have an external sound coming in via the external output from the TB3, which is a device that I actually thought maybe I was going to unload, but I've been using it in the simplest sense, so I can run one sequence, through MIDI. I can run into the 1M for the percussive effect. I can take that into the MIDI in of the Model D. I can take the MIDI through and sync my loops that I'm going to be playing, which will be coming from the modified toy piano. And hopefully, I haven't tried this yet, but with the looper, I can sync all of this together. So I think that is the entirety of the setup. I know that's kind of long-winded, but there was a lot to go through, so I will just try to start this up and see how it might all sound together.